One afternoon, when the sun was going down, a mother and her little boy sat at the door of the cottage, talking about the great stone face. They had only to lift their eyes, and there it was, plain to be seen, 2 miles away, with the sunshine brightening all its features.
What is the great stone face, Mom?
The great stone face was a work of nature formed on the perpendicular side of the mountain by some immense rocks.
Mother, I wish that it could speak, for it looks very kindly. Its voice must be indeed very pleasant. If I ever see a man with such a face, I should love him very much.
If the old prophecy should come to pass, we may see a man sometime with a face exactly as that.
What prophecy do you mean, dear mother?
When I was of your age, my mother told me a story that in a future day, a child should be born near here who is destined to become the greatest and the noblest person, in whose manhood should be an exact resemblance of the great stone face.
Oh, mother, I do hope I shall live to see him.
Perhaps you may.
Ernst never forgot the story that his mother told him. It was always in his mind whenever he looked upon the great stone face. He grew in the same house. He was very dutiful, helped his mother with his little hands. He loved his mother dearly. About this time, there went a rumor throughout the valley that the great man who was to be a resemblance to the great stone face had appeared at last. It seems many years ago, a man who was born in the valley settled at a distant seaport, who earned a lot money too, Mr. Gathergold, which was his name.
Good morning, dear all. Thank you for coming here. I am Gathergold. I earned so much of wealth that it would take 100 years for myself to count my wealth. Now, these are the horses which drawn me here, which are imported, and this is the golden card. Now tell me, isn't it great enough to have the great likeness of Grey Stone Face?
Look at him. It would take 100 years to count his wealth. Wow, what an exact man. How can be more worthy than him to resemble a great stone face?
The years went on. Ernst grew to be a young man. He attracted little notice from the inhabitants of the valley. They saw nothing remarkable in his way of life, except that when the labor of the day was over, he still loved to gaze upon the great stone face. By the time poor Mr. Gathergold was dead and buried, his wealth, which was the body and the spirit of his existence, had disappeared before his death. By the melting away of his gold, it had been generally agreed that there was no like. So happened that another son of the valley had become a soldier many years before. After a great deal of hard fighting, he was now a famous commander. He was known on the battlefield by the name of Blood and Thunder.
Hello, dear fellow mates of the valley. I feel very elated to be with you. I work for the nation and is always a thunder in the hearts of enemies. I also feel great to have a resemblance in the great stone face. Now enjoy the party.
It's the same face, exactly. And why not? He is the greatest man of his or any other age beyond any doubt.
Because of the people's crowd, Ernst was not able to see the Blood and Thunder's face. But at last, when he saw his face, he thought. Many years passed on. Ernst was then an old man, but not in vain. Had grown old, more numerous than the white hairs on his head were the wise thoughts in his mind, and it had ceased to be obscure and sought for undesired had come the fame which so many seek. He had become famous beyond his limits of the valley. Even professors, active men, came from far to take advice of Ernst. While he had been growing old, God has granted a new poetry to this earth. He was too native of the valley, but had spent the greater part of his life in the cities, pouring out his sweet music everywhere. The songs of this poet found their way to Ernst. He read them after his customary toil, seated on the bench before the court, is better as he read. He lifted his eyes to the mountain.
Oh, great stone face, is not this man worthy to be your likeness?
I wish to meet Mr. Ernst. His character, his wisdom, his simplicity of Ababa, I must meet him. Good evening. Can you give a traveler a night shelter?
Gladly, I never saw that the great stone face looking hospitably at a stranger.
Since you have read these poems, you know me then, for I wrote them.
Looked at the great stone face and felt unhappy.
Why are you sad, Mr. Ernst?
Because although my life I have waited for the fulfillment of a prophecy, when I read this poem, I might be fulfilled in you.
You hope to find in me the likeness of the great stone face. I am not worthy to be its likeness.
And why not? Are not these thoughts worthy?
You can hear in them the distant voice of a heavenly song, but my life, dear Ernst, has not corresponding with my thoughts. I have had grand dreams, but they have been only dreams. Sometimes I lack faith in my own thoughts. Why then, a pure seeker of good and truth, should you hope to find in me the face of mountain?
Both of them went to meet the evening gathering where Ernst addressed.
Okay, we have an evening meeting. Let's go.
Ernst threw a look of familiar kindness around upon his audience. He began to speak to the people what was in his heart and mind. His words had power because they agreed with his thoughts, has reality and depth, because they harmonized with the life which he had always lived. It was not mere breath that the preacher uttered, they were the words of life.
Behold, behold, Ernst is himself the likeness of the great stone face.
But Ernst, having finished what he had to say to the poet's arm and walked slowly homeward, still hoping that some wiser and better man than himself would by and by bearing a resemblance to the great stone